From the revenge match between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje to Tony Ferguson breathing the last air into his career, these are some reasons why UFC 291 is going to be the best card in 2023. So let's start with the title match, Gaethje versus Poirier, because part 2 of this rivalry is happening after more than 5 years. Surely it had to happen in its own time, but there's more to it. And it's got something to do with Jorge Masvidal. As the Gamebred decided to retire from the sport, not only did he leave his fans wondering why, but also left the top spot empty. Obviously, there's a lot of contenders. Though who better to fight for the BMF title other than these two? Gaethje might be one of the greatest threats to lightweight fighters, but does Poirier really care? I mean, he does have the upper hand in this fight. Despite losing more matches than his opponent, he's the guy who put Gaethje down the last time they met. In fact, his confidence is through the roof. Now everyone knows just how violent Gaethje gets in the ring. But Poirier thinks that he performs his best with a challenge like that. Of course, Gaethje has improved even more since his last fight with Rafael Fiziev, and even Poirier acknowledges that. Though he still sees him as the same fighter that he put to rest 5 years ago, the same car crash fighter now with a seatbelt on. After all, the rankings do matter too. And for now, Gaethje stands at number 3, just one ranking below Poirier. Though we gotta keep in mind that for Gaethje, it's more than just a title fight. It's revenge, something that he's been looking forward to for over 5 years. Calling it one of the most anticipated matches of this year? Justified. But that's not all. How about throwing Alex Pereira into the mix? First and foremost, I gotta give it to this guy for having the willpower to step back into the ring, especially after his knockout loss to Israel Adesanya in April 2023. But it doesn't end there. His new opponent, Jan Blachowicz, doesn't come slow either. He's completely invested in grabbing the light heavyweight title. Oh, and he's not just confident about defeating Alex, he also aims to send him back to the middleweight division. And that's a problem for Alex. Why? Because he made that decision after his defeat against Adesanya. So returning would mean facing him once again. And that might not be what he wants at the moment. On the other hand, Blachowicz believes that fighters who move up in weight often struggle with timing and speed. So it's his duty to send these fighters, who seem out of place, back to their original weight classes. Clearly, Blachowicz's confidence knows no bounds. Plus, the Polish fighter's also frustrated with the outcome of his last bout. But hey, if he wins this fight, he'll be rewarded with a title shot, so things aren't all that bleak. Of course, it goes without saying that if Pereira emerges victorious, he too will earn a title shot against the current light heavyweight champion, Jamal Hill. Along with the rest of the card though, Dana White also announced the bout between Ikram Aliskerov and Paulo Costa. Boasting an impressive MMA record of 14-1 and a UFC record of 1-0, Aliskerov is destined to shine in the middleweight division. But Costa no slouch either. He's been honing his skills in the fighting arena for years. With a commendable record of 14 wins to 2 losses, Aliskerov's got a lot to worry about, especially since it's only his second UFC fight, which does make you question how he managed to go against such a highly ranked contender. But what can you say? Aliskerov did prove his worth in the previous fight. You see, a first-round knockout victory isn't a walk in the park. And then, his background in combat sambo and his sole career loss to Khamzat Chimaev show that age or experience doesn't matter once you're inside the octagon. Though when it comes to Costa, his most recent bout occurred at UFC 278, where he beat Luke Rockhold. I mean, both fighters are confident, but Costa undoubtedly holds the upper hand. Now let's shift our focus to another Pereira. It's Michael Pereira against Stephen Thompson. Now this matchup is special. Why? Because it rose from the ashes. Allow me to explain. Initially slated for UFC 289, it got canceled because they couldn't reach an agreement, which obviously left fans in a state of disappointment. Oh, and we didn't even get an explanation for the whole saga. Though thankfully, the disappointed fans will not be left disheartened, as the same welterweight bout will now take place just a month later at UFC 291. That said, the level of hype surrounding this matchup isn't on par with its initial announcement at UFC 289. And that's obviously because of the presence of a long list of high-profile fights on the card. But at the same time, the fans that were initially deprived of this match are going to come back stronger. Plus, how can you forget the fighters themselves? Thompson recently won his bout against Kevin Holland, while Pereira's garnered attention by winning 5 consecutive fights. Though, considering that he's also experienced a couple of losses, it's understandable why not everyone's as excited to watch him fight. But at the end of the day, both rank in the top 15 of the welterweight division, so it's going to be a top-class match no matter what. Speaking of Kevin Holland, though, he's also on the card, fighting Michael Chiesa. Told you, it's one of the most interesting cards in UFC history. Not just because of such high-profile fighters, but because they've been able to cram them all onto one card. Thankfully, there are no contract issues that have come out so far. Though, even with the Holland and Chiesa matchup, it was rumored that something of that sort was coming up. But when the boss man, Dana White, confirms it himself, you better believe it's happening. Coming back to the fighters, though, it doesn't look good for Chiesa. The guy's aiming to break out of a losing streak, one that started with Vicente Luque, and Sean Brady made it worse. He was actually scheduled to fight at UFC 287, but then Li Jingliang, his opponent, withdrew, and he had to sit it out. But it's worth mentioning that prior to his recent losses, Chiesa had won 4 consecutive fights. So not all is lost, but it's also clear where the confidence might lie in this bout, because Holland, who recently fought at UFC 287, secured a third-round knockout victory. This, even after the fact that he was restricted by his right hand's movement. It wasn't before losing to Stephen Thompson and Khamzat Chimaev that he got there, though. So no matter what the result, it's going to be interesting to see the two fight it out. And for the last entry, something that the fans have been concerned about, it's Tony Ferguson fighting Bobby Green. It's a bit sad to admit, but it might be time for Ferguson to hang up his gloves. And let me tell you, that's exactly why UFC 291 is so dang important. The 39-year-old hasn't been looking great for a while now, both inside and outside of the octagon, if you catch my drift. I mean, forget about his terrible losing streak of 5 fights that he just can't seem to break. The dude recently got into a serious car accident, and get this, he was actually drunk at the time. But that's not all. Ferguson made matters worse by refusing to take the field sobriety test. It's clear as day that something isn't right with him, and that's got the fans worried. Now, some people think Ferguson is in no shape to step back into the ring, while others are predicting yet another loss for him. Heck, even the ones who are still rooting for him aren't too sure about his performance. But here's the crazy thing. What if he actually wins? That would be one hell of a comeback, and we all know Ferguson is capable of doing that. Don't forget, he's one of the most ferocious fighters in the lightweight division, though it won't be a walk in the park to take down his opponent. Not only does Green have the advantage of being younger, but he's also got a better record in his last 5 fights. Although it's worth mentioning that he's been on a 3-fight losing streak too. The point is, no matter what goes down, UFC 291 is going to be a very important event for Tony. So there you have it. From Tony Ferguson, breathing the last air into his career, to the revenge match between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, these were some reasons why UFC 291 is going to be the best card in 2023.